Welcome to Unlocking the Decentralized podcast. In this episode, cryptocurrency expert Abhi Soomaney explores Web3, blockchain, cryptocurrency tax and investment while engaging with industry pioneers, technologists, and investors. Here is your host, Abhi Soomaney.
Welcome to the fourth episode of Unlocking the Decentralized. Today we're going to talk about initial coin offerings and their tax implications. And with us, we again have Alex Massarjian, CPA, who was with us on the previous episodes. I'm sure you guys remember it when we talked about business management, bookkeeping, and tax aspects when it comes to companies accepting crypto. Welcome again, Alex.
Thank you for having me.
Today, I thought that it would be great if Alex joins us because we pretty much work together in the crypto space assisting clients, and it'll be a good discussion to pretty much fill in the gaps if, I miss something out or we need to add more information to this podcast so our listeners can get the most out of it.
Right.
So let's start about, what is an initial coin offering and is that related to IPOs? That's an initial public offering of security. It's a yes and no, in my opinion, because when companies, go public for an IPO, they already have a well-established business and they have an organization, they have financial reportings done, they file prior taxes. But what happens with crypto companies is that they pretty much have a vision and they have a plan, but there's no financial statements as such ready. But more, in the crypto space, I've seen a lot of companies raise millions of dollars just by having a vision ready and a white paper or pitch deck ready with them.
Now, does this only apply to crypto companies or, can any other company use an ICO to create funding?
Literally, any company can use an ICO. Like, for example, two companies did the ICO and IPO respectively last year. One of them was Coinbase and the other was Binance. Now, if you go to see Binance did an ICO, but Coinbase did an IPO. What happened here is that Binance came up with their own token and raised a certain amount. And then Coinbase did an IPO, listed a few securities, and that's how they raised their money.
Yeah.
So it totally depends on company. Tomorrow, we might even see a company like Microsoft do something like an ICO for a company, or like for a movie or a show that they come up with. Literally, you can come up with an ICO for any project you have in mind. That's pretty much how it would work.
Yeah, so instead of just giving shares to your company, you're providing them with coins instead.
Right, like how
tokens.
Exactly. So how Binance does it is they sold ICO tokens in the form of BNB. And then if you use Binance tokens on the Binance platform, you get a fee write-off and you get, a certain advantages if you trade on that platform using BNB. Not to mention, obviously, the price goes up based on demand and supply of that token. Tax-wise, I would say an IPO is pretty much like raising funds, of course, and it's not really considered as income to the company.
Right.
It's just a company raising funds and diluting their stake. But in an ICO, it totally depends from country and job.
Certain jurisdictions have
exactly.
certain laws that they follow.
So in the US, CO funds that that are raised are considered as income, which is taxed at the highest tax bracket, considering how much of money is raised. Versus if you do an ICO in a country like India or somewhere in Dubai or any other place, it depends on what that country has in terms of tax laws, and then you probably have to pay taxes based on that. India, Dubai, and these countries don't really have laws set for ICO and it's not considered as income. But the US has always, been ahead of the game in terms of taxes and the tax implications and laws being applied since the past several years. So they came up with this tax law that it would be, considered as income.
Because the way that the US sees it is even though you are investing in this, when a coin is dropped, right, the ICO price, oftentimes, they give these tokens to their team members, right? And so for their team members, they don't really have to invest all the time. So when an ICO or when a token is given to them, it is considered income for their team members.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's more like, a benefit that's given to the team. For example, Binance in this case, because we already spoke about it. Binance probably, distributed airdrops to the entire team of Binance and gave them BNB tokens. And then whoever held on to it, probably the price went, however high when they can benefit from that when they sell it.
Yeah.
That, brings me to another point that why do companies actually even do such ICOs? Like, what's the end goal of an ICO? It's pretty straightforward. ICO is done to raise funds. For example, if, a company or a group of people, they have a vision and they would like to, just They find out about a problem that exists in the real world, and they have actual solutions for that problem that can be to any extent. For example, a software solution. They can literally just, raise money with the help of an ICO, having a pitch deck ready or a white paper ready, decide what sort of a blockchain you want to use and just go with it. It's more about creating a better product for them, and that's how they raise funds, and they can use it for researching, they can use it for better development in terms of building a team or just a tech company. Whatever they would like to do, that's how the funds can be used.
And sometimes for investors who really believe in crypto, ICOs are super attractive ways of them raising money because, if you're a strong believer in crypto, you want to have some type of equity, or not equity, but coins when they're first released, because that's where they're probably going to be at their lowest price.
Right, looking at just the history of ICOs, most probably, when ICOs take place, the price or value of the token, once it hits an exchange, it just, increases tremendously. But not all the time. It totally depends on, what the demand of the coin is, how many people really believe in the project, how well the project, puts itself or does its marketing. It's all about PR and marketing at the end of the day. The only, drawback about doing an ICO would be that there's no real government intervention.
Right.
On the good side, there's no barriers to entry for anyone. Like, you can raise funds sitting in one part of the world, and you can actually get that money from across the globe. So it's not that you're actually raising funds from a certain group of people, but you can macro raise here and, focus on pretty much the entire world's population. So no one really goes through your, books of accounts, your revenue systems, business structure, financial statements. None of that is even reviewed, versus it is, when you go with an IPO or initial public offering, you often get these audits from the local government authorities. For example, if you look at the US, the STCG will probably just review all your financials and make sure everything is legitimate.
Yeah, and in fact, it's required for the SEC to have audited financial statements.
Exactly. But when a company does an ICO, it's probably just about coming up with an idea and figuring out a problem either that exists or creating a problem for the world, and then saying that, hey, we're going to solve this problem now. And just, raise funds hoping that they are able to actually solve the problem they are talking about. Many times it happens that even a few companies that commit to certain, achievements, they're not able to do it, or they cannot achieve all their goals, which often leads to like an ICO failure.
Right.
That's when investors tend to lose a lot of money, which is why I always recommend that investors do their research. And there's several parameters of research that's involved that we're going to talk about, ahead on. But it's more like, you need to know where you put your money in before you actually invest it. It's not that every ICO gets listed at a low price and has to be, will double up once it's on an exchange.
Right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, the procedure in ICO.
Right.
And this can apply to any company who is seeking funds, as we mentioned, who has an idea and they need funding for it, or if they're really big on crypto, they can use this as a form of raising funds. So the first thing is, obviously you want to have to come up with an idea, right? There has to be an idea that's backing this project. You can do it without an idea, as we've seen many ICOs, as Abhi mentioned, fail, where there's literally nothing behind it. But if it's a legitimate company, it has an idea, there's a market demand for it. You have to do that market research to see if there is a demand for this type of product or a software or whatever the case may be.
Right.
So, the second thing, just do your market research, see if there's a demand for something like this. And then, when you have the idea together, obviously if you want to move forward with the ICO, there's a lot of legal and tax implications of this depending on where you are jurisdiction wise. So tax attorneys are probably going to be your best friends. It is going to be a little expensive.
Very expensive.
Yeah, depending on where you are. But tax attorneys and just general, attorneys are going to be your best friend. Because whenever an ICO is launched, if you want to do it legitimately, you have to have agreements with the shareholders or, investors in this case. You want to have agreements in place for everything.
Correct.
So then after all that's set up, you want to mint your token, right? There's a lot of ways that you can do this. You can use an existing blockchain. If you want to come up with your own blockchain, that's a whole other can of worms. But anyone can go in and mint tokens. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there. There's a lot of websites that talk about how to do this. And after that's done, or you have to have some sort of pitch deck or white paper that you could present to these investors,
Right.
and talk about what you're working on. And that is just like having a business plan for a regular business. Whenever you have a normal business and you want to seek funding, you generally present investors with a business plan. So white paper is an equivalent of a business plan for an ICO.
Right.
Have a website ready. Make sure it talks about the service or the product that you are trying to provide. And the most important thing is to have PR and marketing. PR and marketing, again, it's an ICO, so it's not like it's going to be listed on a stock exchange, whereas an IPO would, right?
Right.
So you're going to need a lot of marketing to back this up, to get exposure, for people to know who you are.
Right.
And that, kind of builds a community across social media. Instagram, Twitter is a big one for crypto.
Right.
And then with that PR, you can probably do like some type of collaboration to get listed on an exchange. For example, CoinList.
Right.
There's many others.
Right.
But CoinList is really big with ICOs from what I've seen.
Right.
They list a lot of new coins before anyone else really does. Yeah, and then from then you can create smart contracts, you can distribute the tokens, do as you please.
Right. This is literally the entire process when you plan to do an ICO.
Obviously it's probably a little bit more complex. We had to shorten it up, but there's a lot of detail that goes into it. But generally speaking, this is the main process of it.
Right. When we're talking about PR and marketing, I came across this a few days ago about marketing, that if you plan to come up with a company, the company tagline or the name itself should have something to do with your business, and half your marketing work is already done. Which really interested me a lot. It's relevant to the company that we put together, that's Crypto Tax, that talks for itself. So it's crypto investment, and we do the taxes, so it's Crypto Tax. That's something that really interested me. Now it might sound very easy to just put together a cryptocurrency of your own, but is it that simple to do it?
No, so it's really not that simple. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of details that go into these various steps. These are just some of the main points that need to be focused on. But, a lot of people that do these ICOs are, single founders that literally probably just, they have a tech background and they can Google how to, mint the tokens on a blockchain, for example.
We've assisted a lot of clients too that just come up with their token.
Right. Yeah.
And they have an idea. It's a great project. They have an idea and they end up raising like 500,000, 600,000 just out of that idea. The fact that individuals can actually raise that kind of money in today's day and time without relying on banks and interests and all that stuff. They can have a direct communication with their group of investors without really even, having a lot done. And then they can use that money to actually focus on achieving their goals.
Right. Yeah. And, one of the big things for investors investing in ICOs, do a lot of research.
Okay.
ICO drops, again, they're very risky depending on what the company does, who are the founders. So my suggestion to investors is to research who are the founders, what are their backgrounds, what is their goal, read the white papers, what are their tokenomics, what's the max token supply, who's a part of the team. So all of these things need to be considered, obviously, for investors before they invest in projects like this. One of the websites that's helpful for this is ICOdrops.com. You can do your research there. Go on Twitter. Go on their Discord channel. CoinMarketCap has a lot of information as to what projects do.
Right.
There's also an auditor, Certic. They audit these ICOs and crypto companies or cryptocurrencies to see if they are legitimate.
Right.
Sometimes they are not. So there's a lot of research that needs to be involved in this.
Right. And, I personally have used ICO Drops just to research about a lot of ICO companies, and they have a good user interface and they explain everything very nicely to investors that are looking to invest in ICOs. Like they have, ICOs that happened in the past, that are upcoming ICOs, current ICOs that are actually happening in real time.
Right.
And they have their own internal system that actually audits the ICO and they rate it. They call it either high interest, low interest, moderate. So that's how they, help investors, just to guide them a little bit. Again, it's a disclaimer that they don't really, guarantee that if they feel the project will do well, the project actually does well.
Right.
And CoinMarketCap, like you mentioned, they have a lot of information there just about, tokenomics, like you said.
They have their Twitter channels and social media of the coins all out there.
Everything, like what blockchain is used to mint those tokens, what are the total supply of the coins, what is circulating supply, how many coins or tokens will be distributed to the team, what percentage will be given to, either early seed investors, how much did seed investors buy these tokens
however many tokens are in circulation. Right, yeah. So
Exactly.
all of those factors you need to consider before investing in any ICO project.
Yep. So, when we talk about ICO and how easy or, complicated the process is, do you have an idea about, how long would it take someone to just come up with their own token?
I mean, you can come up with your own token tomorrow if you wanted to. I mean, it's very easy to mint a token, which is a little scary for investors. If you invent or create or mint a token on an existing blockchain, it can be done very quickly. But most of that cost for an ICO goes into, as I mentioned before, the PR, the marketing. If you're a legitimate company, you're going to want to spend a lot on PR, marketing, gathering a legitimate team together. Like, for example, our team. We have over 8 CPAs on board. Gathering all those people alone takes time. There's going to be website costs. You're going to have to pay a developer to get your website up and running, maybe a logo designer. Those business expenses are a part of this. But the most costly thing is probably going to be getting a PR team and a legal team together.
So the key, expenses that I summarize from this is PR, marketing, and a legal tax attorneys. But, just to create your own token for a hobby, you can literally make that within $50 US dollars. By, minting it on a Solana, Ethereum, or a Polygon blockchain. You might need native tokens from each of these blockchain that's valued at $50 or below just to mint a few tokens, and you're done. So you can create wallet addresses using something like a MetaMask Trust wallet and transfer coins over there. So that's how straightforward it is, and that's literally what goes into either coming up with an ICO, which is, as you said, scary because now anyone could do an ICO, and that's how easy the process has become now.
Just make sure for investors, do a lot of research on that coin.
And when we talk about coming up with an ICO, okay, that's pretty much straightforward. The costs involved, and when you reach the PR stage, you have your marketing team set up, you have everything done. Now comes the point where you actually have to list the tokens on an exchange. When you want to list your tokens on an exchange, it doesn't seem to be that straightforward or inexpensive. What are your thoughts on that?
So I feel every exchange has a different procedure to listing their tokens. I know Coinbase, for example, requires a big payment for them to list your token. It could be that you have a relationship with some exchange and they want your coin on board. Getting that process. I mean, there's not really a set procedure for each exchange. But I would suggest for anyone looking into doing an ICO is to reach out to their sales teams, go on Coinbase or wherever it is, or whatever exchange, Binance, and look in the contact us section. Reach out to them. Again, some of these exchanges might require a listing fee. A lot of times they are pretty hefty from what we've seen. But, it's not impossible.
Correct. So a trend that I've seen personally, that coins that get listed on Coinbase and Binance, it's pretty rare to see all these altcoins like, Saitama and Shiba Inu to get listed on something like a Coinbase and Binance that are, one of the 2 biggest exchange houses around the globe. They probably have their internal audit team that would
make sure you're legit,
verify your token, and then go through the tokenomics. They are basically the SEC when it comes to IPOs. They review all your financials, your project, how legitimate the project is, and then they would essentially take a portion in cash and rest in tokens of your own listing. For other platforms that are not that bigger in size, they might just be happy to list your tokens in exchange of receiving tokens that you would like to put up.
And then exchanges do this to avoid rug pulls. Obviously, we've seen rug pulls happen. It's unfortunate, but it's something that exists.
Right.
So when a rug pull happens, it also looks bad on the exchange, right? Because they listed this coin that wasn't legitimate. So keep in mind that they try to avoid these things, but sometimes it's just inevitable.
Absolutely.
Right.
Now, also, there's a lot of confusion when it comes to ICO investments being taxed.
Right.
So let's focus on, the company side first, and then we'll move on to the individual side.
Right.
For companies, in countries like the US, income, it's considered as income for the company that's doing an ICO or raising fund in the form of an ICO. When you compare it with other countries, they don't really tax it on income. They consider it as you just raising funds to do your operations, like we mentioned before. That totally depends on each country and all the amendments that each government agency or IRS or taxing authorities are coming up with.
Right.
That probably will be it'll be more straightforward in the coming years, in my opinion.
I feel they're going to regulate it a little bit more because of the Lunas and
it has
coins.
to be. Like, think about it. Luna had its own stable coin UST that fell from $1. Now, why would you have a stable coin, calling it a stable coin, and that drops from $1 to almost $0?
Right.
Now that can directly impact the US dollar in general, because now, like, literally Luna was minting UST tokens, calling it the dollar, and then suddenly it loses all its value. So it shrunk the market and wiped off billions of dollars just within a few hours.
Think of this in terms of the U.S. government. How can a coin be backed by the dollar?
Right.
It's not minted by the U.S. government.
That itself is alarming. USDT, USDC, all these tokens, in my opinion, yeah, they're good. USDT and USDC stay with the dollar and are pegged, but even that, what if tomorrow the value of that falls for some reason? So who's to be blamed? And what does the US government do about it?
Right.
If that is even approved, then every country will have its own currency in cryptocurrency. For example, Great British Pound in a token, or any other country in a token. So that's
not even minted by that country. It
Right.
can be minted by any individual.
It can directly impact each government or each country. Now, looking at the investor angle, the holding period begins from the time you can actually trade those tokens in an active market. Now, this is a confusion amongst most ICO investors that, okay, I invested in ICO, 5 years ago or 2 years ago, but there was a vesting period. Those tokens were locked, but if I sell it when I can sell it now after 2 years, once the vesting period is over, is that still a long-term capital gain? Firstly, to answer that, no, because you couldn't trade those tokens actively in a market.
Right.
So your holding period begins from the time you can either
trade that in an active market.
There is liquidity in the market and there's demand for that token, and you have the ability and access to those tokens to sell them. The cost obviously would be how much ever you invested in the ICO, and your sales proceeds would be how much you sell it for once you can actually sell it in the market.
Right.
When we talk about a vesting period, investors need to understand that that lock-in period cannot be considered as a holding period at all.
Right.
That's something that needed more
clarification. Right, for sure.
There are also a few ICOs that I've come across that often, lose liquidity or just, there's no demand for it.
Right.
So what happens in such cases, it gets really complicated because then, you have these tokens in your hand and then no one really wants to buy it from you. So what do you do with it? Because, for example, I invest $10,000 in an ICO and when the vesting period ends and there comes a time when I want to sell it, but there's no one ready to buy it at whatever price I want to sell it at. And if I have certain gains on other investments in crypto, for example, on Bitcoin on the side, there is a possibility of me to still take that loss by just, transferring these coins to a burn address that's provided by, the token company that has listed the token. This basically means that
you're no longer holding those coins. So there is a transaction history that shows that, hey, I basically sold these coins for nothing.
Right. It basically also says that you do not have ownership on those tokens anymore, and there's no way for you to get it back or even, benefit from that in any terms.
Right.
So that way you can take 100% loss deduction against other gains on, other investments.
Right.
So whatever was the ICO investment cost would be 100% written off against gains on something like a Bitcoin if you had gains over there.
Right.
But when we talk about all these rug pulls and losing liquidity, it drives me towards delisting of cryptocurrency. Now, we have seen the recent times a few cryptocurrencies like Luna were delisted for some time so that it can protect investors. But what do you think about this?
Yeah. So first of all, can any coin get delisted? The answer is yes. There was a few examples. Look at Ripple, for example. There was a SEC case for insider trading, amongst other things, and exchanges were forced to delist the coin. This can literally happen to any coin that the SEC decides to regulate, and if they find something, then this would cause a delisting of that. I believe you can still buy this outside of the US, but I would imagine that other countries, I don't know, the regulations in other countries are probably going to follow what the US does eventually because we're so far ahead. But again, any coin can get delisted. Luna, for example, when it crashed, immediately got delisted. Imagine how many people lost money.
Right.
And you couldn't even do anything about it. Even stable coins, UST, can also get delisted because the pegging of the dollar, it's not pegged to the dollar anymore. Things like this can cause coins to get delisted.
So in a way, we can say that there is a certain level of government intervention when it comes to delisting of cryptocurrencies. It is always it's a known fact that there is not much of government involvement when it comes to ICOs and just these crypto companies coming up with a project, raising funds. But when things go south and there's a lot of investor money at stake, that's the point where government agencies can get involved at any point and just start auditing these companies, like you said, for Ripple.
Right.
Which is a good thing, but in my opinion, in the coming years, the whole point about blockchain and cryptocurrency is about freedom, but it needs a set of regulations, not just by private companies like Certic, like you mentioned.
Right.
It's not that a private individual or a private organization can just do the audit and then we're good to go.
Right.
It is real money at stake. Investors put in their savings, so there has to be a certain type of
some type of guideline for these ICOs to follow.
Right. Like for example, all companies say that they have a certain maximum limit on their token supply. Companies like obviously token and coins like Ethereum, Bitcoin has a set limit of 21 million, but coins like Ethereum don't.
Right.
So that's straightforward, that there can be n number of Ethereum tokens that can be put into circulation at any point.
Right.
But if you think about it, what really is the guarantee that okay, fine, there will not be more tokens?
Than why? What's going to incentivize that company to not just mint more?
Right, but also I look at it in a way that when I was looking at the max supply for Luna, before it crashed,
right,
it was a few millions, and then when it crashed, the price, obviously the number of tokens in supply went up to about 6 trillion, which crashed the price and all of that stuff. But
how could that be if the max supply was only a set amount of however many, I think it was like a few million.
Right. There might be some, technicalities behind it that I'm missing on, but, just thinking as a layman, if this can happen with something like a Luna, what is the guarantee that, okay, if another company does something similar, that they cannot create additional smart contracts or, mint additional tokens.
Or go from like a proof of work to a proof of stake, whereas there's no power to mint those tokens, and they can just mint however many they want.
Right. So that's something that would need more assurity, and that the only way I see it can be provided is by the government, or a government agency that can get involved just to help solve that problem. Now, there's a lot of regulations that that come to my mind when we talk about cryptocurrencies in general.
Yeah. So in your opinion, what country or which country is the most supportive when it comes to ICOs or just crypto in general?
If you look at today, as of today, the most crypto friendly country or a geographic location that I think about is Dubai, because think about it this way: there's no income tax over there. The government over there is setting actual guidelines for crypto companies to come and open shop over there, run operations. There's no banks rejecting you just because you're a crypto company.
I've seen that here in the US, where we had a couple of clients actually come to us and say that their bank account was randomly closed just because they're a crypto company.
Right. So, that's a big red flag right
Right.
there. If I have a crypto company coming up, I would surely look at Dubai as an option just to incorporate it and raise funds from there.
Right.
Yeah, there might be certain restrictions when you would like to raise funds from the US market, but there's over, millions and billions of investors just putting their money in crypto, and in today's time the US market is not the largest share of total investors involved in the crypto space.
I mean, not a small fraction, but it's just a fraction of the worldwide investors.
Absolutely. And to answer that question, Dubai would be a tax heaven, a crypto heaven, and just the best spot for you to run an operation, without having the problems or trouble to just have your account running. Something that simple would even create a lot of problems in other countries. To summarize everything, initial coin offerings are a lot of fun. Yes, they have there's great projects coming up. We have Web3, there's metaverse coming up, NFT companies. But whenever investors would like to put their money into any sort of an ICO, please do your research. We spoke about a lot of websites.
Check their Discord channels, check their Twitter, check all their social media, check if they're audited by Certic or another private auditor.
Right.
See which exchanges they are listed on, or if they're going to get listed on. Check their white paper to make sure their project is legitimate or if it makes sense.
Right. All of these things that we talk about right now is out of experience, and white paper is something that you can refer to, which should have all the information that you need before you put your money into, any company, just like you would do while investing in an IPO company. Well, we hope this session gave you some knowledge from us that we could deliver, and you pick from it and invest safely and do your own research, and do not listen to my neighbor, my friend trying to buy this. That's not how it works. You got to do your own research and put your money in a safe place. So I hope you guys stay tuned, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you
guys.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Unlocking the Decentralized. This podcast is sponsored by Crypto Tax, your one-stop solution for cryptocurrency taxes. Learn more at cryptotax.co.in.